Just the thing I like about you.
Thrive Recovery Center opened in Hop Hog in March. March 3rd, actually on my birthday, because it's all about me, right? And what we are, we're different. We're not treatment. We're not clinical. We are peer-run. We are volunteer-run. And we are support services for people in recovery as they define it. People who are trying to stay sober. And again, substance use, this is why it started, right? The opiate crisis and all that we're seeing. But people are in recovery for all types of things. So all recovery is welcome, including families who are in that process. So we do things like yoga, meditation, Dharma talks, spiritual explorations. I do drum circles. And then we have things like vocational readiness and life skills and peer leadership skill training. So if people are in recovery or trying to maintain their sobriety as they define it, that's why Thrive exists. It's community run. It's a living, breathing organism. So if you have questions about that, I'll stay after too, and I'm happy to answer questions and give you more information, but definitely check it out, thriveli.org. But let's talk about why I'm here, right? So digital age and wellness, right? Emotional regulation, right? Now we could probably spend easily 4 hours on each topic, right? So I'm gonna do my best to condense everything that I'm thinking into an hour. But let's start with the world today. Faster or slower? Asked to do more or asked to do less? With more resources or less resources? Okay. How many of you have a phone, an iPhone or an Android or one of those other fancy ones? How many of you also have a laptop or a tablet? A desktop computer at home and at work, a second phone because, sometimes we're on call for work, right? So how many of you have 3 or more digital devices? Including your work ones, right? Most of us. When I say the word, and I kind of primed you a little unfairly, but when I say the word technology, what do you think of? You can just yell it. Too much. Just the word, technology. What comes to mind? Information. Accommodations, interesting. Visually, what do you see? Technology. Computer. Cell phones. Screens. Okay. What is technology? Because if we're going to talk about the digital age, right, and we're going to talk about what's happening in the world, mine right here is going to tell me what time it is, right? If we're going to talk about this, we should probably understand what technology is. Just like if we're going to talk about emotional regulation, we should probably know what emotions are and why we have them. And even though sometimes we think we know, how do we translate that information to young people? Right, so how many of you work with young people? It's a youth-focused conference, right? So you might understand, but how does that translate to the people that you work with? So technology has existed way before cell phones, right? We are both limited by it and we are both enhanced by it. How many of you drove here? Yep, you guys took the roads, right? Or some of you off-roaded it and just landed here. Yeah. We are both limited and enhanced by it. You were enhanced by it, why? Because you were able to get here, probably faster than by foot, right? But you had to take the roads that were already laid for you, right? So let's talk about the history of technology. Why do we even have it? What's the point? What's the point of technology? If we're going to talk about how it's affecting us, we should probably know why we have it. Supposedly to make our lives easier. Somebody once said, and I don't remember his name because he was wrong, that by this so-and-so year, that like past 20 years ago, we'd be happier and have more free time because things would be done quicker. Like machines or whatever would get the job done faster, so we would have more time to enjoy ourselves. Isn't that interesting? Because what seems to have happened? We got slammed with, oh, things can be done faster, so you have more free time to do more work, right? Which is interesting. So the reason for technology, we're trying to enhance the human experience in some way. I'm trying to make myself bigger, better, faster, stronger. right? A telescope, right? I want to see farther than the eye can see. I want to be able to alter genetics or the human experience. So you look at things like birth control, right? There's a purpose, but we're using technology to do it. If we want to make things bigger, or sometimes smaller, right? Better, faster, stronger. Can we associate that with anything else in the world that's going on right now, i.e. the drug epidemic? Bigger, better, faster. Why do we have more potent drugs? Why are pharmaceutical drugs? Why are we chasing, right? How come we started with liquor, with alcohol, and now we developed liquor? You know, liquor doesn't just produce, we made that, right? Cocaine, same thing. We take this natural thing and we make it more potent, bigger, better, faster, stronger, right? So everything about our information or technological age that's been the point. How do I get this done? How do I improve this? How do I make this better? Which speaks to a cultural thing that's going on that we're never satisfied, right? When you look at young people, you work with young people, be mindful about how you talk about what success is. By the way, I'm going to talk in circles, so if you get confused, just stop me. When you talk to kids about their future, right? Sometimes we talk about success. And how do we define success? Best school, best job, more money, more education, more, right? It's all mirroring the same cultural concept. What happens, and maybe you know what this is like too, is because we have this desire to improve all the time, because we have this desire to make things better and always be better and always be faster, we have competition, right? And then the competition got too much, so we implemented participation trophies. And what a mixed message is that for a young person? Be the best, work the hardest, you need to be on top, like, oh, but good job, thanks for trying, right? It's a very mixed message, and then we wonder why people are so anxious, right? Look at TV, same thing, what's on TV? Competitions, right? Or crime dramas, for whatever that's worth. I'm still looking into that one. But success, we tend to put after, or we put before happiness, rather, right? So we say, once I graduate high school, then I'll be happy. Once I get into college, then I'll be happy. Once I finish college, then I'll be happy. Once I get a job, once I get a family, once I have a kid, once I have a house, then I'll be happy. And we keep pushing the happy off. And it's very reflective of how we engage in the digital world. So technology, bigger, better, faster, right? I also, even though a lot of what we talk about is probably concerns, we're going to talk about like how is this not helpful. Really important that you know what your biases are on it. Really important, because if you're going to talk to young people, so how many of you are counselors? Social workers? Okay. If you're going to talk about it, you got to know what your bias is going in. And we all have them around technology. Now, this is not new, right? The older generation has always looked at the younger generation and gone, you kids are crazy. You don't know what you're doing. In my day, we wouldn't, everyone does it. The generation gap used to be, I want to say 17 years is like a generation, but now you have people in my generation looking at 5 or 10 years younger going, I don't relate to them at all, right? So what's that about? Technology changes, right? It always does. Television, let's go back even further. Radio took 58 years to reach 50 billion people, okay? 58 years to reach 50 billion people. Smartphone apps took 9 months. What's my point? Technology's always changed, right? It's not so much that technology changes, it's the speed at which it changes that freaks us out. Biologically, we're pretty much the same as we've always been. Biologically, we're pretty much the same as our ancestors thousands of years ago. What are our basic needs? Shout them out. Food. Shelter. Water. That's food, isn't it? Sustenance. Okay. Food, water, shelter, basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy. What else we need? Love, companionship. Thank you, Nicole. And then we're all looking for self-actualization. Oh, blaming you. Great. True, very true. They're the same basic needs. We still need them, right? Our threats are a lot different. Like what's threatening us, right? I'm not going outside, picking berries, like looking out for tigers in 2018, right? So, but we still have, in keeping with this emotional spectrum, right? So we still have the same emotions that we've always had. Our world has shifted, right? So we don't always know what to do with them. When technology changes, it hits us, right? You ever get a new phone and you're like, this is 100% different than my other one, and I don't know why'd they have to change it. We don't like change. We don't change very easily, right? We change when we have to. So when it hits us, all of a sudden, we don't always know what to do with it, and there's an anxiety, and a social anxiety around that, because we don't have the rules or the structure or the experience to manage it well. But technology is always changing, and it's not always bad or good. And here's how I'll help you with this. How many of you would say the written word? Gutenberg's press, right? Great invention. How many? Yeah, written word. Love books. Love reading. It's a great thing. The written word. You're all confused. You don't want to raise your hand. That's okay. What did we do before that? Oral tradition. Someone like me who likes to ramble on and on would get up in front of a room and tell you guys stories. You'd listen. You'd be like, oh, you'd all be social, right? What did we do after that, though? Well, we had the written word, but it was scrolls, so then you had to read, so I would leave, and someone else would read the scroll to all of you. And then advanced learning, more people could read. The printing press mass-produced written text, right? And we all developed a personal relationship with the written word, and we isolated. What about clocks? We used to do things by the sun and the moon, right? And then, do you know who created the clock tower? The monks, because they wanted just like a time system to keep themselves. But the community responded, right? So that the bells would go off lunchtime, bells would go off, go home, and everyone would go home. So it was still communal. And then what happened? We miniaturized the clock. We developed a personal relationship with time. Time wasted, time lost, time gained. Now we don't work those anymore, they just aren't here, right? What about the washing machine? How many of you would say that's a good invention? Love the washing machine, wouldn't get an apartment without it. What did we do before that? Well, you hand wash things so he's a little more mindful. That's number one. And before that, way back when, y'all walked to the, why did I say y'all? I don't know what that's about. I would go down to the river and wash clothes together. There was a communal element to it. What did we do before cars? We walked, well, maybe horses if you were like rich, I guess. I don't know who rode horses. Horses, or you walked, right? And could you imagine, you're walking to work, how many people you would interact with that you no longer do because you're driving a car? Just something to consider, right? So computers. 1965, the first personal computer. We were at the Harvard Addictions Conference a couple of years ago. A guy put 1965 on the PowerPoint. Also, you'll notice I'm doing a presentation on the digital age with no technology. I don't know if I'm ironic, I'm brilliant, or maybe I just forgot it at home. So 1965, and from that year, he showed like one of those line graphs going up, right? Correlational effect. And he said, what does this represent? Well, every diagnosis you could possibly think of. ADHD, bipolar, substance use disorders, and other addictive disorders, right? Now, yes, we've gotten better and more effective at assessing, and we're more, the stigma and all that. But the stats are in since the release of the personal computer, we've seen like an increase in these things. Just interesting to know. The iPhone is it came out in 2007, so it's, 10 years old? We don't even know what this thing's going to do yet. We only have ideas, and that's why we're all gathered here today, so that we can start to look at this stuff and assess it. Using the knowledge we already have about the world, or about what we already know about substance use, what we already know about emotions, we just want to apply it in the context of the digital world. So notice your biases. All of you work with young people, basically, right? Their world is not your world, right? We know this. And it could be as simple as you saying, you ever sit with a kid, a young person, and their phone just keeps vibrating? They leave it, but you're talking to them, it just keeps going. You notice that? Maybe it's yours too, it keeps going. And then sometimes they look at it, sometimes they don't. If you were to ask them, is there ever a time you don't want to be interrupted? They wouldn't understand the question. Why? Because that's their life. That's not an interruption. That's just how it is. They don't view it the same way. They're not being interrupted. Someone's just texting them. So something as simple as what we're thinking about, like, oh my gosh, I wish people would just leave me alone, and I hate group texts, and blah, and who invented that, right? They're just like part of life. So our approach has to be inquisitive in that way. Like, what's that like for you, seeing your phone vibrate all day, right? Maybe it's impacting them, maybe it isn't, but we can't assume that, right? So let's talk about, I'm just checking the time because I'll just keep going. What technology, what are you seeing? I'm sure you came here for a reason. Either you're thinking of a kid or you're thinking of an idea or something you want to learn. What are the things that you're seeing as they relate to technology that are affecting the young people you're working with? Say that again? Increased anxiety. Anxiety, what's the emotion behind anxiety? Fear. And what does fear stand for? F everything and run. If you're working with young people, forget everything and run. Or face everything and recover, right? Remember I said biologically we're pretty much the same? What do we do when we're afraid? 3 things. Fight, flight, freeze, right? What does that look like in 2018? Because if I see a tiger, which is rare for me in my line of work, I'm going to do one of those 3 things, right? And we all know the people in our lives. Some people are runners. Like, by the time you even notice the tiger, your friend is like 50 yards away. Some people would just freeze and not know what to do, right? And some people would be like, tiger, I'm going to just go out with a bang, I guess, you know. No one I know anymore. No, I'm kidding. So how does that affect us now, though? So we're not really in constant danger, although media would have you think otherwise, right? This unknown threat, we don't even know if it's real news, like fake news. Who invented that? That's a thing now. Threats from the world that we don't even live in, right? That are constantly there. So there's that world stress stuff that's coming in. We used to tell people, like, if you're depressed, stop reading the news. And now it's like, what do we tell people? It's like always there, no matter what, right? So there's that fear, but there's no one to fight, and there's really nowhere to run. There's nothing to run to. Or what about, like, how many of you are seeing more school refusal and anxiety around going to school? What's your solution? What do we do? Depends on the parents. A little bit. Home instruction. What's anxiety again? What does fear stand for again? All right, okay. So we know when it comes to anxiety, or fear really, if you face it, it becomes less scary. I'm not telling you to go fight tigers. It's a different story. We've moved on. But school, right, not really. Sometimes there's a threat, different. If there's an experience or a trauma or something that happens, it has to be dealt with differently. But the fear, if you run from it, you will never overcome it. That's what substance use is. Then we wonder why we have a substance use epidemic. It's a masking of fear. It's an avoidance of fear. And the more you avoid a fear, the more terrifying it becomes. The more terrifying, not the less, the more terrifying. What do we do? How do we treat anxiety? So exposure, right? There's a huge part of CBT. Someone else said medicine. You guys watch primetime TV? In between like the beer commercials and the Dos Equis guy, they're selling me prescription drugs when I don't know nothing about medicine, right? Just notice that too. We're anxious, so we're more anxious, and we're getting bombarded with images about how to fix it around in a way that we know nothing about. And it's a quick fix, because even though my parents think I should go to therapy and my counselor at school says I should see a therapist, I'd rather just take a pill and be done with it. So we prescribe things like benzodiazepines, which are Xanax, Valium, whatever. They are not the treatment for anxiety. They are the medication for anxiety. And they're designed for people who can't function otherwise. Like, I physically can't leave my house, like agoraphobia, things that are so crippling that you can't even get a word out, right? And also treated with psychosocial intervention, right? So CBT, use as an example, you can't be on benzos and effectively use CBT. Why? You can't. You might start on them, but by the time you get to the real important stuff, you can't be on the benzo. Why? Yeah.
Because you have to be present.
You have to be present. You have to experience that experience. Use the example of someone who's afraid to go into a grocery store. I'm afraid to go in them, but for different reasons. They're very overwhelming, right? So some people, many people, they think they're gonna have a panic attack and then they think they're gonna die in the grocery store. We know panic attacks don't kill people, right? So worst case scenario, they're uncomfortable for a little bit. Discomfort, okay, let's tie it back to technology. Discomfort, that's what we're trying to teach people how to tolerate. Fear is uncomfortable, right? So for the person with CBT, if you're on a benzodiazepine, you can go in a grocery store, maybe, but you're not actually dealing with the issue. You've medicated it. The minute I take that away, you're like, I can't function. And the school refusal piece is tied up with that. The more the kid avoids school, actually the more terrified of school they become. But it's tricky. It's not like this is a 1 and 1 equals 2 situation. But what is that about? So this whole avoidance of experience thing is tied to the digital age and is tied to emotional regulation. So we've talked about fear. Fear, a primary emotion. What are the other 3 that you really need to know about? Anger, thank you, saw you, my lip read. Anger. Sadness. Happiness. Mad, glad, sad, scared. Really the only ones you have to know to work with young people. The others you should know, are like jealousy, shame, guilt, and love, those are important. For the purposes of what we're talking about, everything really could boil down to those 4. Mad, glad, sad, and scared. What do you notice about 2 or 3 of those emotions? Not negative. And that's okay, everyone says that. But they're not negative, right? They're not bad. They're uncomfortable. I don't want to be sad, I don't want to be angry, and I definitely don't want to be afraid. Happiness, that's like what we're all chasing, right? But of those emotions, they're not negative, but they are very uncomfortable. If we don't know what to do with them because you experience them all day, all the time. Driving here, you're late, now you're anxious and you're mad because your dog refused, to go on demand and you're just like pissed off. And now you're anxious because you're in traffic and you forgot you lived on Long Island where there's always traffic. And you're like, forget, now you're just like, you know what? Forget it. You remember mindfulness, you learned something, and you're like, this is okay. I'll get there when I get there. You're like, all right. And then someone cuts you off, and you're like, all day we're doing this. And if you're a teenager, you're like doing this, right? And then we wonder why they're crazy, right? They're not crazy. That's not the clinical term. They're just emotionally unregulated. Prefrontal cortex not developed till 25. We can't expect teenagers to manage themselves without learning some skills to do it. Same with adults. So don't expect them to know something that they don't know, to teach them. All day, every day, those emotions. And if 2 or 3 of them don't feel so good, I'm gonna look for something to what? Make me feel better, right? Too much stimulation, pressure. Pressure to keep up. If you've ever been on Twitter, I don't know how you're even in this room, or like surviving, because that thing moves like this. Pressure. Not enough time to process pressure? Stress. So I feel this pressure, and now I'm stressed about trying to keep up. And when there's too much stress, there's anxiety, which is just a jambalaya of different fears that I feel disempowered to solve. Anxiety. Not enough time or skills to figure out what to do with anxiety. You get things like substance use and school refusal and gaming addiction and every other addictive thing you could possibly think of. What is the purpose? And this might seem like a very simple question, but it's something that young people most certainly don't know, and we probably don't talk enough about. We talked about the purpose of technology, even though sometimes it backfires on us, right? What's the purpose of emotions? We've had them since we were first, whatever we were, a living thing, like thousands of years ago. We've always had emotions. What's the point of them? If most of my primary emotions are so uncomfortable, what the heck is the point of them? Yes? Survival, which basically everything you could relate back to survival, right? In what way? Who said protect us? Can you elaborate? Okay, can someone elaborate? How do they protect us? They communicate, right? They communicate how we feel both internally to ourselves. So like walking down a dark alleyway, by myself in the middle of a neighborhood I don't know, I might get like uncomfortable and be a little afraid. And I might say, gee, Lisa, this feels like fear. Maybe you shouldn't walk down that alleyway. And then I'm like, you're crazy, and I go anyway. But face everything, recover, right? But that emotion says something to me. If I am nervous about a test, I'm not going to say anxious about a test, I'm nervous about taking a test, right? That motivates my behavior, right? I'm going to go home, I'm going to study, and I'm going to do really well, and then mom's going to put it on the fridge, and every time I get my milk, I'm going to be like, look at me, right? Face everything and recover. Or I could say, forget it, I'm never going to pass, right? And avoid, and not study. Because if I don't study, then I can't fail, because I never tried. Remember, we said we're in a very competitive world. Either you're the best or you're not. Rather not try and be mediocre. And at least I can play the either I'm funny or I'm whatever part, right? But we all have, they fluctuate, there's a purpose to them. Anger motivates us. The point of anger? Well, like I work in substance use. People don't get into treatment. I'm angry. I'm gonna go kick down some doors nicely and like ask what the heck's going on because I'm angry there's an injustice going on. People getting hurt. Motivates my behavior. Fear, also very motivating, as we said, and protective, right? Also, and we know sadness is how we process through grief by being able to express our emotional experience of loss. There's a purpose, there's a healing purpose to sadness. It also will tell you a lot about what you care about. Because if you're not upset about losing something, you probably didn't care too much about it. And happiness is like the reinforcement. When I'm happy, I do something that makes me happy, I keep doing it. Hence, substance use crisis. I keep going back to that because that's just my world. But we chase happy, right? And we have all these other ones that we think are in the way, but they're not in the way. They're just giving us information about the world. So teach young people that. They're not bad emotions. They're very useful. What does it mean to you that you're so afraid of this? Or what does that mean to you that you're feeling so angry? And by the way, they might not know those words. Teach them those words. They might say, I just feel like I want to punch someone. Can you give that a word? What might that be, right? Some people talk about action. Some people talk about feeling. I feel, like, how do you feel? I feel hot. Oh, okay, notice that. Can we give that a word? And give them lists of words, they can pick it out. Help them identify, they might not know. We have a program, or LICAT has a program called anger management. Heard of it? It's not called anger elimination. We're not getting rid of emotions. We're learning how to manage them. And by the way, teach young people, their emotions, actually, let me ask you this question. Are emotions always valid?
No.
Who says no? Who says yes? Who's not paying attention? Emotions are always valid. Always valid. They don't always make sense to us. They might be larger than is healthy. Like, I might be devastated when really I should just be like all upset. Or I might be like anxious when really a little nervous. Makes sense, right? But they're always valid. So you never want to tell your young people that you work with how they should or should not feel. Don't should on your students. Don't do it. Should. Don't should on anyone. Why? You're invalidating their entire experience. Have you ever been in a really bad mood and then someone was in a really good mood and they came up to you and you're like, ugh. Or you're in like a really happy mood and someone is like playing like Opeth in like darkness and you're like, I can't be around you, dude. Like, I'm in a good mood, you're bringing me down. Experience that? Or just the music, like you're in a bad mood and happy music just makes you feel like, how is anyone ever happy, like this happy? It doesn't make sense, right? It feels invalidating. We don't like it. Because you're basically, someone else is coming into your environment going, it's okay, dude, like you're fine. And you're like, I'm not fine, and stop snapping. So think of that for yourself, and know that you don't want to do that to young people either. There's a question.
Well, it was more of saying, when I work with young kids, one of the things I always
Yeah.
say to them is that all feelings are okay.
Mhm.
But it's what we do with them that is most important.
So here's the language you want to use. Useful or not useful, helpful or not helpful, working or not working, not bad and good. Just like we said, emotions aren't bad or good. The feeling sad isn't bad, but is it working? Are you getting your needs met? Are people listening to you, right? Now, how do we tie that into this thing? All right, well, we said emotions communicate, right? Let me check the time. Emotions communicate to others. If you came up to me and you were like, hey, Lisa, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm fine. You'd be like, you're not fine. What's wrong? And I'd be like, nothing. You'd be like, something's wrong, and then you'd pull me aside because you're all helping professionals, right? If you came up to me and you were like, hey, Lisa, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. You'd be like, good, I don't have a crisis to deal with right now, and I can move on. Let me also talk about that for a second. So how are you feeling today? Fine. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling today? How are you feeling today? Those aren't emotions. Those are judgments of emotions. Now listen, we live in New York. Someone's like, hey, how you doing? You're not gonna be like, well, let me check in with myself and give you a real answer. They'd be like, I'm out of here, and like move on, right? But you should know whatever your emotional experience is and teach people how to do that. We tend to just stay on judgments. I'm okay, I'm good, I'm not so good, I'm all right, I'm okay. Those are not emotions. Those are judgments of emotions. How do you feel emotionally is a different question. And we want to help people young people link their physical experience, their urge, their action urge, and the word to their emotion so that that's how they can learn what it is. And remind them, all emotions are valid, it may not be working for you, or your emotion is totally on point, but your behavior isn't working. So that's different too. I might be a kid in class and I don't like my teacher sure as heck does not like me, and that does happen. And when I get angry because she says something or she dismisses me, maybe that's a trigger for me or something, I pick up a chair and I throw it through a window. My emotion totally fits the facts. She totally did dismiss you, dude, like you're right. And also, you throwing the chair through the window is not very useful, right? Entitled to the emotion, always. If it fits the facts, great, but then look at the behavior. Is the behavior working or not working? And here's where this comes into play, behavior. We talked about avoidance, we talked about emotions. Why do young people love social media? It's fantasy life, that's well said. Instant gratification, it's all the things we just talked about. Instant gratification, instant distraction or avoidance. You guys go out to dinner and you see a group of young people and they're actually talking and you're like, it's so nice to see that. And then one of them goes up and goes to the bathroom and there's a silence and then they're all back on the phone. And you're like, so close. And then you're like, wait, I'm on my phone too. And then you all, okay. Distraction, we're all very uncomfortable in silence. We're all very uncomfortable with ourselves. So we distract. We shop or we scroll. Have you ever just mindlessly scrolled? I mean, what am I even looking at? It happens, right? We get on this automatic pilot and you want to link this to addiction. It's easy because every time you click on something new, you get a little dopamine surge. Every time there's a new image or a novelty thing, that's why pornography is such a problem in the whole other side of this addiction thing. The access to constant stimulation, it totally messes with your dopamine reward system. So what your ability to feel real pleasure in real time is completely destroyed. What does it do? So emotionally, right? This is where you want to link this stuff for young people. They communicate with these things, right? They text each other, hey, how you doing? They get back, fine. There's no emotion. They have no idea how the other person feels. It's me being a robot. No idea. Maybe emojis help. But there's a lot, it's all that unknown fantasy. It's all fantasy. And if you're a parent and you've ever texted your kid and they haven't texted you back, and you'd be freaked out, that's fantasy, right? Anxiety, why does this contribute? Because if we don't get the instant gratification, we're devastated, right? So we've got thousands of friends, no one to talk to. You are always obsessively aware of where everyone else is. So when anything challenges your sense of safety, you freak out. So parents texting their kids and going, you do that emotional thing. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm worried, I'm scared, and then you're just pissed. They know I'm texting them, now I'm just mad. Meanwhile, you forgot that they stayed late today at school. They stayed for extra help. You forgot that. Our mental horror films that we play, boyfriend, girlfriend, who are you texting, right? Or where are you? We play this film out. We wrap ourselves into secondary emotions. Our emotions love each other, right? So I'm anxious, then I'm mad, and then I never even acknowledge the fact that I'm just jealous, right? You're texting someone else, right? And instead of saying, no, that makes me very uncomfortable and I feel jealous, you go, what the heck's the matter with you? I'm right here. I go, see what you're doing, and they're like, you're crazy. And they're right. We act on secondary emotions, so help young people figure out how they actually feel about stuff. When you saw your boyfriend texting someone else, what did you feel? Anger. What did you feel before the anger? Scared? Insecure. That's called jealous. Jealousy, afraid of losing something that's important to you, right? Teach them this stuff. This is so easy to just be instant reply, and at the same time, it's all performance. We wonder why we're so anxious. 24 hours a day, I'm literally being filmed right now in a more obvious way. But any one of us could walk out of our safe little place of living and be taken a picture of. If that doesn't scare you, yikes. That's terrifying, and everyone has them. So now, not only do you have to figure out how to be a young person, you have to figure out how to be a young person who's perfect all the time, because God forbid someone snaps a picture of you in your less than perfect moment and posts it. Now you're talking about trauma, potentially, and 20 billion potential viewers of that with their opinions ready to go. And then we wonder, the number one fear is public speaking. It's what I'm doing right now. And thank God it's not my number one fear. Mine's flying in airplanes, in case you were wondering. Number 2 is death. Number 1, public speaking. Number 2, death. Okay, let's process that for a second. Public speaking. Why? Who's afraid? I don't know why I'm doing this. Public speaking. Why are we afraid of public speaking? I'm going to sound stupid, make a mistake. No one's going to care about what I'm saying. I'm going to look weird. I'm going to wear 2 different shoes accidentally. Done that. But death, number 2. This is all public. People don't post their first selfie they take. They post like the 30th one after many filters and changing the light bulbs. Why? Because what the digital world has done is created a world of fantasy where I get to, Freud is like laughing or crying, I'm not sure. Ego, who I want you all to think that I am, not who I am. Who I want you to think I am. The pretty one, the smart one, the funny one, the clever one. What is so particularly dangerous about this? It's the same with texting. Like someone texts you and you're like, I don't know what to say, and you look at your friend, you're like, what should I say? It's performance. It's performance. We're very afraid of real time being ourselves in a moment. Terrified, and young people who are trying to figure out who they are in this world, call it digiphrenia. It's like schizophrenia, but digital. Like, I don't know who I am, right? And nobody really does. That's a lifelong process. And here's my last bit of, am I out on time? How much time do I have? So can anyone tell me how much time I have?
10 minutes.
Oh, I have 10 minutes? Okay. This gets so excited. Identity. Young people will choose different platforms for different reasons. Mom's on Facebook. I'm a different me on Facebook. Instagram, and then there's Finsta, which is your fake Instagram, which is arguably who either you really are or your goofy, ridiculous self. Snapchat. It's all an exploration, moratorium, I think Erickson calls it, right? And it's not necessarily bad, but is it, remember these terms, is it working for you, is it not working for you? What were you hoping would happen when you posted that picture of yourself? Not why did you post that picture of yourself? What were you hoping would happen? What were you hoping the outcome would be? Because if I was hoping for something unrealistic, or my entire sense of self-worth is based on it, right? That internal versus external locus of control. Social media, the digital world, asks us to do one thing that we all hate. We ask people to judge us. Comment and like it. Tell me, I'm going to post something that I think is funny, or I'm going to post a picture of me that I think is really good. Now you tell me that it is good. You tell me I'm funny. You tell me I'm pretty. You tell me I'm smart. If my entire identity is wrapped up in that, I could go into a clinical depression with only like getting 10 likes when I thought it deserved 50 likes. If I think it's a pretty picture and I post it and I don't care how many people like it, not unhealthy, right? Useful or not useful. What were you hoping would happen when you texted your friend, go F yourself? What were you hoping? I was hoping that she would understand that I was angry, but she didn't use the word angry. Basic communication skills, you guys know already. I feel, when you, I would like. That's it. Same thing in text. And what I love about it is I use it. Like, show me what you said. I was really nice to Mom, I swear. They always say this. Like, I did say it that way. I said it real nice. I'm like, show me. And they're like, I'm like, okay, better than last week. But it's not. You can actually see it. You're like, you're right. Your mom did come off a little aggressive in that. Now, and also, how do you know that? It's words in a text. What's a better way to solve this problem or solve this conflict? Talk to her. Right? I don't know how to do that. I'll teach you. We'll practice. I'll help you. Don't expect them to know how to talk to each other. So all those basic things that maybe seem like obvious, just go talk to them. They might not know how. Let's talk about all the things that freak you out about that. What if I say something stupid? Okay. What if you say something stupid? What happens? I look stupid? You look stupid? What if they say something stupid? I don't know. You gonna care? No. Okay. Process it with them. Teach and role play. I'll be your friend, you be you. And then we'll switch. I'll be you. They can write things out. Use the tools you have. They're not going anywhere. So the reality is, know that it's all about performance, but if there's an element of performance, it's a great way for them to practice their communication. They can type it out in their notes section and then send it after reviewing it. That's not bad. That's learning. That's the process. And link up what they were saying with what they wanted. Because communication is all about teaching people how to get their needs met, right? So did you get your needs met or not? Did it work out for you or did it not work out for you? And what did you learn from the situation? What were you hoping would happen? It's a great question. Is it working or not working? Great question. How do you feel about it? What do I do with that fear? What's the purpose of it? Teach them that so it's not as overwhelming. Teach them why they're angry. Yeah, it makes sense that you're angry. I'm angry too. That makes sense. It's not wrong. Their intensity we might want to bring in. Yes?
Do you think interpersonal communication is savable?
Savable? It's a good question. I'm going to go with yes, because I'm an optimist. I'm not actually. I'm a nihilist. I'm kidding. Kind of. All right. Yes, I think it's savable. At the end of the day, we are social creatures, right? We are not getting our needs met with this. We're not. That's why we're anxious, right? People are adaptable and people will survive. You go back to all we really are supposed to be doing on this earth is surviving. If you really boil it down to simple. We have to interconnect to survive. So either long term, the people with the good interpersonal skills will procreate and live on, or people will feel like they're not getting their needs met through this, and they will seek other interaction. We're adaptable. Like, things don't destroy us. We thought the TV, the boob tube, was gonna kill children. I mean, we think drastically about new stuff because it's new. I think it's scary. I think there will be a movement around it. Everything we do is like that. We always overcorrect, then we undercorrect, and we overcorrect, right? So yeah, I think people will adapt because that's just how we'll survive. I don't know that it'll be like a easy thing, but we're trying. And young people will tell you that they feel better when they don't have their phones on them all the time. So there is a movement around it. I think what happened is you had a generation of parents who were hit with it and didn't know what to do with it, and we started giving kids phones without telling them it was a privilege. And then they attached to it, and then we couldn't set boundaries, and then we just lost all control. What? What's that?
No, so we still have that.
We still have it, yeah.
I have a parent, my principal came to me and said, this parent just gave all of her children the iPhone 8, and the youngest one is in 2nd grade.
Right. So we know, listen, last two things. Empathy is developed through nonverbal communication. Empathy, the ability to feel for others, developed through nonverbal communication. The earlier you put the screens in their hands, the less likely they are to develop effective empathy skills. That's terrifying. We should probably talk about that. Empathy, that whole disconnected, I don't care thing. Everything is viewed as replaceable. Look at dating apps, right? There's literally plenty of fish. Replaceable. If you're not into me, you might be. So we were lacking this intimacy and craving love. So the best thing you can do for young people, besides teach them all these things and explore all this stuff with them and the skills related, talk to them about purpose. Talk to them about identity that's not static. You're not the athlete. You're not the smart one. You're the kid who works really hard. You're the kid who's a great friend. You know why? Because you can't take that away from anyone. If I break my leg, what am I now? Not an athlete. If suddenly classes start getting real hard for me and I can't figure it out, I'm no longer the smart one, who am I? You're the kid who works really hard. You're the kid who always shows up on time. You're the kid who smiles every time I see you. You're the kid who's there for his friends. You're the kid. Focus on their actions and make those their identity. Because that's, if anything, because social media is not going anywhere, if that's their identity, that's the identity they should be putting on their social media. Who do you want to be? Not the pretty one, not the smart one. Show them what's important to you. So talk about values they don't know. And without purpose, people get lost. And remember that no matter what a young person is doing, they're trying to survive, they're trying to feel better. They're not trying to be destructive. They're trying to survive. They're trying to protect themselves. Same with the school refusal. That's their way of avoiding, because they're protecting something so strongly. And building trust and engagement, if I don't talk about that as a social worker, meet them literally where they're at. This is where they're at, without judgment, and be genuinely curious about if it's working for them or not working for them. Questions? And then I think I'm out of time. Yeah.
On the last thing you just said, actually, it's like a perfect segue for what I wanted to bring up. I do think that it's unrealistic for us to, as adults, to expect like children to not be on their phones ever.
Right.
I just don't think that's where we're going, like the trajectory of technology
Right.
and apps and whatever. I do think it's important, everything you said, 100%, I believe everything and support that. On top of it, I think it's also up to us as people in children's lives and as educators. Even if you're a social worker, you're still educating on some sort of topic that they don't know. Even if you're not a social worker, you're still a person who has more knowledge regardless. I think it's up to us to research and learn more things that might apply to them. For instance, there are numerous apps and numerous websites that provide services that could be beneficial, where there are apps like one called Booster Buddy that is literally an app where you sit down and there's little reward systems where you gain points, but you have to do 3 quests a day, where it's like, oh, what are you struggling with today? Oh, you're feeling anxious? This is a mindfulness exercise.
Right. So there are social media outlets and apps that are so helpful and do engage people in a healthier way. So we should know what those are, and there's great mindfulness ones. Yeah. Any other questions? I hear people shuffling. You're probably uncomfortable. It's okay. I'll stay after. Thank you so much.
Just the thing I like about you. Just the thing I like about you.